This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. This week, we're going to wrap up our look at the school board and members who have served on the school board by talking to Amanda Russell, who is representing the 2010s. Amanda started serving on the school board in 2012 and served 5 terms on the school board. Welcome, Amanda. How are you today?
I am doing good. Thank you.
For the listener who might not be aware of who Amanda Russell is, what's your elevator speed?
Parent of 4 students who have all completed their public school education in Dover. This is my 31st year in education. And apparently I am outspoken when I feel I need to be, and that's what probably wound me up on the school board.
On the school board as opposed to the utility commission, because I remember you coming and speaking about the Cranbrook pump station.
I did.
That's how I met you.
Yes. I went home and I mowed that lawn, and now my neighbors do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's good delegation skills.
Yeah. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I said people in the neighborhood can do this. I'll do it. Yeah.
So with that attitude, you ran for the school board.
Yeah, I figured I was showing up at the meetings. If the school board chair would look at me, if I didn't stand up and speak, that it was time to have more than just a voice at the meetings. It was time to have the ability to vote for the things that I believed our schools needed.
What was the environment like at that time? What were some of the issues that the school board was wrestling with that you wanted to get involved with?
I think probably what really pushed me over the edge was the infamous green sheet, the list of things we could cut, or that we would consider cutting. And that started a year or two before I was on the school board. It was so frustrating to see the people battling to save really vital programs, battling about whether or not we were going to keep the NJROTC, whether or not we were going to keep middle school band, how juggling all of those things. And it was really upsetting. And then somehow, I don't even remember how, but I got roped into leading a rally on the steps of City Hall in May or June of 2011. I was given a megaphone and we took it from there. And then next thing I knew, I was being asked to run for the school board.
Was it that things on the green sheet were vital to your philosophy of what education should consist of? Or was it that there was a green sheet at all that we were prioritizing in such a way that it seemed more at a whim than thought out and with the kids in mind?
Yes, I think it was both. When you're talking about cutting programs that lead to careers or cutting programs that provide our students with access to things that are just innately human, like art and music and literature, that's really sad because they're not going to get it anywhere else because of the cost, right? It's going to be a burden on the family if the student can't do those things in school. The parents are going to have to try to find a way to provide, or you don't have it. And I just can't imagine living in a society that has no art, no music, no literature, no drama. And I mean drama as in theatrical, not in... It'd
be kind of nice to live in a world without the other kind of drama.
It would be delightful, yeah.
What was the school board like when you got on it in 2012?
Brand spanking new.
Yeah?
6 of 7 had never served on the school board before.
So Mrs. Grady was the hair.
She was the only. Oh, and that isn't true. It was 5 out of 7. Right. Ken Appel was a holdover as well. It was new, and the chair was new and had never served. And I was new as vice chair. The secretary was new. And honestly, the superintendent was pretty darn new as well in her role as superintendent, not within the district. Yep. So it was a pretty huge learning curve in the midst of tax cap wars and budget crunches and changes at the state. And we had a lot of long meetings.
Thinking back to that time frame to set the stage for the listener, you could say we were out of the Great Recession, but really we're still financially from a municipality standpoint, it's still pretty far in it in the sense of how the tax cap that you referenced was being impacted and how it impacted still to this day. I think decisions that were made had to be made for one reason or another, and we still see the outcomes of that recession.
Yeah. And I think probably if I think back to the thing that I regret the most, those first 2 years, we brought forward tax cap budgets. And that implied that what we didn't include wasn't necessary, when in fact it was necessary. And that's probably the thing that I regret the most, was that I didn't dig in. And even if we in the final vote didn't get the money, that we should have fought for what our students and our staff needed in order to run the schools. You know, when we're spending significantly more on electricity and fuel and all of those expenses, the only place to take that money out is in people. Just before I started to serve that budget prior, so the FY11, there was a board member who said, I'm looking for things, not people. You could only cut things for so long because you run out of things. We were looking at instituting all kinds of fees. We did institute a bus fee, which, just for the record, I would have paid happily every year if it meant that I never had to drive near the high school or the middle school during arrival or dismissal, because it was brutal.
And still is. Yeah.
So I would have, and I did, because I had high school students, and so I paid the bus fee. And with 4 kids, I had high school, middle school, elementary school, and preschool when I first started serving on the board. And then my family became the test family. Like, what would it cost Amanda's family if we imposed these fees across the district? Because I had a kid at every level. It wasn't a relief in any way, because parents still had to bear that burden. I am happy about the budgets that we as the board passed later on, even when we didn't get from the city council what we had hoped, because I think we were making a point that our job is to provide for the students and the staff. And if we're not speaking up for them, then we're not doing our job. You can do that and still be fiscally responsible.
By my back of the napkin, as it were, mental tally here, you were involved with multiple superintendent searches, and you had the pleasure of helping to shepherd the high school construction through.
Yes, I did.
Those the 2 biggest challenges you saw, besides out of the budget conversation? Are there other things that you look back and say, you know what, that might have been sleeper, but that was the real thing we wrestled with?
I think that's probably accurate, that I did 3 superintendent searches in my 10 years. And the high school project work started before the JBC was formed.
Right.
I came by to sign paperwork one Thursday afternoon, and interim superintendent Fernandez said, hey, do you have a minute? And an hour later, my 7th grader sitting out in the hall, just wanting to go home, staff members were offering her a ride home just so she didn't have to sit there anymore. So that project started early and before it officially started, because we needed to get our ducks in a row in order to capture that CTC money. And the superintendent searches were arduous, painful, laborious. I do believe that in the end, each of those times we hired the best candidate that we had in front of us.
Good.
And I don't know who the other candidates were, but I believe that Dr. Boston is the person who should take up the reins after Dr. Harbert is done. I commend the board for making that decision. We've invested time and money in Christine Boston, and she has invested it in us, working at the middle school, the high school, the central office. Like, she's
a well-rounded candidate,
yeah,
to say the least.
She knows the departments and she knows the players. And yes, she's been through a lot in her tenure.
You served 10 years. Is that too long, too short, the right amount? Was it the right amount for you?
It was the right amount for me. I would have kept going if there hadn't been a candidate, but it would have been exceptionally hard. When I started on the board, my kids were small, but I only worked 2 jobs that were part-time. So I had time for the board, and I had time that I was available sometimes during the day and could do things. It got harder as I worked more. And I wanted to work full time. Kids going to college, and it's a lot easier to pay for it when you work full time and not part time. And it was harder as I went to full time. I suppose it wasn't as, it'll sound funny, it wasn't as bad during COVID because I wasn't pulled away from my home as much. Meetings were virtual.
Right.
So there wasn't travel to and from. I was arriving 20 minutes early and then staying afterwards having conversations with, I've been around for a while. The school administrators and I are acquainted well. And now working as an administrator, I have a whole different perspective on their job. And so now it became a little bit easier. The decisions weren't, but the job was easier.
How do you look back at COVID and your experience as a school board member?
I think we made the best decision with the information that we had. And I think Dover went above and beyond what most communities did by creating our own task force with medical personnel. I'm not aware of other New Hampshire cities and towns that took that step. It was hard because I had kids in school, my own children, and they were not happy with the decisions that I was making. It's probably why one of my sons stopped playing football, because there was no freshman team that year. So he went to practice and then just stood around at game. They didn't play a single freshman or JV game that year. And that was because it was a board decision. Varsity did go undefeated in regular season that year. All 4 games. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard to make those decisions with being part of the community. It spilled over into other areas of my life. People distanced themselves from me or I from them because of decisions that were made during COVID. And that's unfortunate, but I wasn't just thinking about my children or my neighbor's children. I was thinking about 4,000 children and, the staff who had to teach them. And
so I want to circle back to you get on the board and you're immediately the vice chair. Mm-hmm. Was that yeah, sure, I'll do it? Or was that looking around the room and no one's raising their hand?
I knew if I was nominated, I was going to accept a nomination. And we were all pretty confident that neither Mrs. Grady nor Dr. Appel wanted one of those positions.
Sure.
Which they would have confirmed that they were not interested. So it had to be newbies.
Yep.
There was no one else to choose from. I'd been in education for 20-ish years at that point. So I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on what schools needed. I did a lot of on-the-job learning about what it takes to serve in that capacity.
I have to think that both Miss Grady and Dr. Appel were the type that would be happy to offer advice and quote-unquote mentorship, but would recognize that their role was not in the chair or vice chair role.
Yes. And there was nobody who could proofread like Dr. Appel. Yeah. Everyone knew if there was a new policy, Ken's got it. He's going to find every typo, every misplaced comma. He's going to suggest a wordsmithing here and there. And yeah, he was all in the details. Yeah. I didn't realize I was sitting so close to someone who was so famous until one of our student reps was, going on and on about him. And I was like, oh, wow. I'm like, Google search. Wow. Who knew? Ken's sitting right there. Yeah.
During your time, were there any other grand changeovers like that? It seems like there was certainly some changeover.
Yeah.
But 5 new board members is pretty radical in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I don't think we had 5 new ones again any time that I served. I think the radicalness of the other part would have been, I think, the relationship between the board and the council. Yeah. It was very contentious. There was a tremendous amount of animosity. And the first 2 years were brutal. And then I feel like every year after that, it got much more of a team effort, a team lift. And my last 3 or 4 years were pretty solid. with the relationship between the council and the school board. And I think there was a lot of trust that had been lost and was rebuilt in that time. And I think we streamlined a lot of things as far as procedurally for both groups, so that, you know, we stopped having to have Principal Booty watching the clock because it was almost 10 o'clock. And if we went to 10, we had to vote to extend the meeting, which we did multiple times in the early years of my service. And by the end, you know, we were a well-oiled machine knocking it out. So it was, yeah, it's hard, I think, for the school board especially, because you come in, you get sworn in January 2nd, and you might have a school board meeting the next day and you're talking about budget.
Right.
That's really hard. If you haven't, I mean, I was there all the time at meetings, but if you hadn't been at the meetings and following the meetings, then you're kind of floundering.
Yeah, I've talked to some folks that over the years have said, particularly with the school board, hopefully with the council, as soon as you put your name in the ring, if you're not attending the meetings, then you're going to start way behind.
Yeah.
That September, when you put your hat on and say, I am willing to sign up for this race, maybe more so with the school board because they tend to be less contested than council meeting or council races, but certainly the budget side of it, that the school board right now is prepping, I'm sure, for the upcoming fall-winter conversation.
And the admin are definitely already in budget mode.
Right. Well, you know, and it's interesting, the city side we're pretty close to that.
Yep.
I'm prepping for it as well. It's, I'm sure in both cases, what might have been here's a 4-month chunk of the year is now a 8-month chunk of the year, because there's reconciliation and there's spillover and there's all of those aspects. So you get 10 years.
Yep.
You must have got a pin or some sort of hat or something.
After my last meeting, I got a clock.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
It looks like a book and it opens up. I don't remember what's on. It's on my desk at work. There
have been multiple school board members over time that have run for council after. Is that something you've thought about?
No. Well, I've thought about how I don't want to do it. Yeah. My passion is for education, and I didn't do it for my kids. I did it for other people's kids. If my children needed me to advocate for them, I was going to do it. But not every kid has that. And when you don't work in education for 30 years and not see that kids need advocates. So no, I don't. I mean, yes, I do care about the price of trash bags because I buy them, but that is not.
Sure.
That's not my jam.
Yeah.
And
you understand where your focus lies, and you wanted to work on that focus.
Yes. And, you know, being part of the JBC for the last 10 and a half years, I learned a lot about a lot. You know, there was traffic stuff and so much blasting, and got called one day for a paint emergency. Bob Carrier called. He said, Amanda, we got to go look at something at the high school. Can you meet me there? And I said, yeah, I can come during lunch. And hard hat, safety vest, go check out the paint. There were some entertaining moments.
As we wrap up, is there anything you want to leave the listener with? Any takeaways that you've had? Anything that jump out to you as if I have to look back, you've mentioned the superintendent recruitment, COVID, and the high school construction. Are there things that you want to make sure that the listener hears?
Well, I think the thing that I most learned was which battles to fight and when to walk away. I was under the impression that if I worked hard enough, I could make people see things the way I saw them. And sometimes you just can't. Kathy Baker said to me, Amanda, one's perception is one's reality. And you cannot change one's perception. I tried really, really hard. But I think that serves me well. You know, I'm working with teenagers. I know when to walk away from the argument and wait.
Yeah.
And then let's come back and have a conversation That's probably why I ended up in administration, the next challenge.
So as we wrap up, I want to thank you for coming in today. I think that you don't give yourself enough credit for the relationship building with the council. I think that from the very start, that when we started, I mentioned the pump station, and one of the takeaways I took then, and I throughout knowing you, is if you believe something, you're going to say something, and that goes a long way towards building that relationship with the council, and that you were willing to go and say, we are dysfunctional and we can't be dysfunctional, and working with council counterparts to say, we might not always agree, but we have to be reading the same book. Yeah. We have to understand the same language in order to actually communicate. And guess what? We're not communicating. And I think the efforts that you made, efforts others made alongside you, really got us to a much better point where we're at today, where you can have conversations and say, yeah, this is what the school board thinks is the right budget number, and this is what the council can say is the bottom line it can make work. And there seems to be some teeth gnashing still, but not grinding and fussing and fighting. It's more of okay, we're agreeing to disagree. This is what we can get. Great. Let's be happy that we got here.
I sat next to Betsy Andrews Parker for several years. We were neighbors. We've been friends. Our kids grew up together, and we disagreed. We disagreed on camera. And then the meeting was over, and we were still friends.
Because you had civil discourse.
Yeah. And, I haven't agreed with the mayor on every issue.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I know that he's doing what he believes is right, and he knows that I was doing what I knew was right, and walk away and provide him with lifesavers still.
Ah, you're the source.
I used to be at I always have them for JBC. Yeah, slide them over. And then we'd have joint council and school board meetings and be like, what? I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't bring any lifesavers today.
Ah, secrets of the joint meetings revealed.
Yes, lifesavers.
Well, as I said, I appreciate you coming in today and having this conversation with us and giving the listener an insight to what it was like serving on the school board for 10 years.
It was a party.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
On September 27, 1911, workers at the Cocheco Printworks in downtown Dover received good news. The Printworks' massive complex of 15 buildings on 30 acres, boasting 130,000 spindles and producing 65 million yards of finished cloth each year, employed more than 2,000 people. 2 years earlier, in 1909, the Cocheco Printworks had been purchased by the Pacific Mills Corporation in Lawrence, Massachusetts. After the purchase, which included the entire Cocheco Manufacturing Company, the word out of Lawrence indicated the company would move the operations in Dover to Massachusetts. But 2 years later, in 1911, there was hope Dover's Printworks would remain in the garrison city indefinitely. The Cocheco Printworks was the culmination of a rapid rise in calico printing that began in Dover in 1826 in Mill No. 4 of the Cocheco Manufacturing Company. What started out as block printing on cotton by hand in a single mill building quickly grew to meet the demand of the company's sought-after goods, growing into more than a dozen buildings and utilizing new technology, cylinder printing, to churn out printed cotton products around the clock. Prints from Dover were renowned worldwide for their quality. Unfortunately, the good news in September 1911 wouldn't last. Although the Printworks would remain in Dover, continuing to operate under the ownership of the Pacific Mills Corporation, just 2 years later, in 1913, the Printworks component of the mills was closed and torn down, and with it, a legacy of the textile manufacturing that began in the early 1800s. The sprawling Printworks complex, once torn down, would make way for what is now Henry Law Park. Competition from textile processors in the American South continued to batter northern textile operations, which were burdened by the high cost of heating the mills in the winter. The Great Depression would constrict the demand for northern textiles even more, which led the Pacific Mills Corporation to shutter the entire complex in 1937. The city purchased the remaining mill buildings of the Pacific Mills Corporation at auction in 1941. The mill buildings, though, would eventually become an economic success story, converting the old manufacturing space for commercial and residential use. The buildings are now owned by Chinberg Properties.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.